Right now, somewhere, you are being left out of something. A group chat you weren't added to, a meeting that happened without you, a friend group that made plans and forgot to ask. It stings. You tell yourself it's nothing, but your body doesn't believe you. Because 300,000 years ago, being left out wasn't an inconvenience. It was a death sentence, and your brain still hasn't gotten the memo. You are about to learn about the single, deadliest mistake an ancient human could make. It wasn't picking the wrong plant. It wasn't sleeping too close to a river. It wasn't even facing down a predator with nothing but a sharpened stick. It was something quieter than all of that. Something that looks, on the surface, like nothing at all. It was getting cast out of the group. Picture it. You are a hunter-gatherer on the open grassland, somewhere in what is now East Africa. There is no 911. There is no fence. There is no roof over your head that locks from the inside. There is only you, a handful of tools made from stone and bone, and the 20 or 30 other humans who share your fire. That's it. That's your entire safety net. No hospitals, no supermarkets, no weapons that can drop a lion from 50 meters away. Just you, your spear, and your people. Now, imagine that safety net disappears. Imagine the group decides they don't want you anymore. Maybe you broke a rule. Maybe you took more meat than your share. Maybe you challenged the wrong elder at the wrong moment. Whatever the reason, the outcome is the same. You are told, in no uncertain terms, to leave. What happens next? You cannot hunt large animals alone. A single human, even a strong one, is no match for a herd of buffalo or a pride of lions. Group hunting isn't a preference for early humans. It's the entire strategy. It's the reason a soft, slow, clawless, fangless primate managed to become the most dominant predator on the planet. Take away the group, and you take away the strategy. You cannot watch for danger while you sleep. In a group, someone is always half awake, always listening. Alone, every rustle in the grass becomes a coin flip between nothing and a predator's jaws. You cannot share the labor of survival. Someone gathers, someone hunts, someone watches the children, someone tends the fire. Alone, you must do all of it, all the time, with no rest. And you cannot heal. If you break a leg alone on the Savanna, that isn't an injury. That's the end. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy has spent decades studying what she calls cooperative breeding in early human groups. The idea that human children, unlike almost any other primate's offspring, were raised not just by a mother, but by a whole network of caregivers. Aunts, grandmothers, older siblings, unrelated group members. Take a human out of that network, and you don't just lose a friend. You lose the entire infrastructure that allowed the human species to survive childhood in the first place. So when early humans exiled someone, they weren't handing down a punishment. They were handing down a death sentence with a delay. The exiled person might last days, maybe weeks if they were lucky and skilled and the land was generous. But the odds were never in their favor. Alone on the open savanna, without the group, a human being was one of the most vulnerable creatures alive. This is why, if you go back far enough, exile appears again and again across ancient cultures as the ultimate punishment. Not death, exile. Because everyone already understood that exile was death. It just took a little longer, and it let the group's hands stay clean. Here is the part that should stop you. Your brain still treats social exclusion exactly the way it did back then. Not as an inconvenience, as a threat to your life. In the early 2000s, psychologist Kipling Williams developed something called the cyberball paradigm to study this. Participants played a simple, harmless-looking game of catch on a computer screen with two other virtual players. At some point, the other two players simply stopped throwing the ball to the participant. That's the entire experiment. No insults, no confrontation. Just being quietly, digitally left out of a game of catch. And the participants' brains reacted as if something terrible had happened. Neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger, working with Matthew Lieberman, put people in an fMRI scanner while they played this exact game. When participants were excluded, the region of the brain that lit up was the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. If that name means nothing to you, here's the plain version. It's the same region that activates when you stub your toe, when you burn your hand, when you feel physical pain. Being left out of a game of catch, on a screen, by strangers you'd never meet, activated the same neural circuitry as an actual physical injury. Why would evolution build a brain that responds to social rejection the same way it responds to a broken bone? Because for most of human history, they were the same thing. A broken bone was a threat to your survival. Losing your place in the group was a threat to your survival. Your brain didn't build two separate alarm systems because it didn't need to. Exclusion and injury led to the same outcome: death. So it wired them to the same alarm. That sting you feel when you're left out of the group chat isn't an overreaction. It's an ancient alarm system, firing exactly as designed, using exactly the wiring that once kept your ancestors alive. There's a reason this alarm is so loud and so hard to ignore and so hard to argue yourself out of. Evolution doesn't build subtle warnings for existential threats. It builds sirens. Think about what it would have taken for early humans to develop this response. The individuals in the group who felt nothing when they were excluded, who shrugged it off, who didn't feel the urgent need to repair the relationship, to apologize, to fall back in line, those individuals didn't survive as often. They wandered off. They took the risk. They didn't come back. The individuals who felt exclusion as unbearable, who would do almost anything to avoid it, who monitored the group's approval constantly and adjusted their behavior to stay inside the circle, those are the ones whose genes made it to you. You are, quite literally, descended from the humans, who were the most afraid of being left out. This is worth sitting with for a second. Your sensitivity to social rejection isn't a flaw in your personality. It isn't something to be embarrassed about. It's a survival trait, inherited from every single ancestor who ever lived, all the way back through hundreds of thousands of years of small, tightly bonded human groups where belonging was the difference between living and dying. Now here's the twist. The same system that once protected you is now, in many ways, working against you. Sociologist and neuroscientist John Cacioppo spent much of his career studying loneliness, and one of his central findings was striking. Loneliness doesn't just feel bad. It functions in the body like a chronic stress state: elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, weakened immune response, increased risk of cardiovascular disease. Cacioppo argued that loneliness evolved as a signal, not unlike hunger or thirst, a biological nudge meant to push you back toward the group, back toward safety. Hunger tells you, find food or you will die. Thirst tells you, find water or you will die. And loneliness tells you, find your people or you will die. For most of human history, that signal worked exactly as intended. You felt the ache of isolation, and the solution was right there. You walked back to the fire. You rejoined the circle. The alarm turned off because the actual threat was resolved, but the modern world broke the loop. You can now feel intensely, achingly lonely while surrounded by more human contact than any ancestor could have imagined. Hundreds of online friends, a phone full of contacts, a city of 8 million strangers outside your window. And still, that ancient alarm can be blaring because the alarm was never built to measure how many people are technically nearby. It was built to measure something else entirely: whether you feel truly, safely, unconditionally inside the group. A crowded room can trigger the exact same neural alarm as an empty one, if you don't feel like you belong in it. This is why being excluded from a small group chat can hurt more than walking through a stadium full of strangers who ignore you completely. The strangers were never your group. The group chat was. Think about how this plays out in ordinary modern life. You post something online and it gets almost no response. Your chest tightens. You check again 5 minutes later. Nothing has changed, but you check anyway. That's not vanity. That's the same circuitry that once made your ancestors scan the horizon, desperate to see if their group was coming back for them. You get left off an invite list at work. You tell yourself it's not a big deal, but you replay it in your head that night anyway, running through possible reasons, wondering what you did wrong. That's not overthinking. That's an ancient threat detection system trying to solve a problem that, on the Savanna, would have needed solving immediately, before nightfall, before the predators came out. Even the language humans use for rejection gives it away. You say your feelings were hurt, not disappointed, not annoyed, hurt. The same word you'd use for a physical wound. Your ancestors weren't speaking in metaphors. As far as your nervous system is concerned, there's barely a metaphor there at all. There's another layer to this that makes the ancient mistake even more dangerous. Exclusion in early human groups was rarely a single dramatic event. It was often a slow fade, a gradual pulling away, fewer invitations to hunt, less food shared at the fire, eyes that no longer met yours, conversations that stopped when you walked up. This slow version of exclusion may have been even more dangerous than a sudden banishment because it was harder to see coming and harder to fight against. There was no single moment to argue your case, no clear line to cross back over. Just a slow erosion of your place in the group until one day you realized you were already, functionally, alone. Sound familiar? It should. This is exactly how modern social exclusion tends to work too. Friendships don't usually end with a dramatic fight. They end with slower replies, fewer invitations, a group photo you weren't in. By the time you notice, the distance has already been growing for months. Your ancient brain is exquisitely tuned to detect this slow fade, because detecting it early, back then, might have given you time to repair things before the exclusion became permanent. That's why you notice when someone's texts get shorter. That's why you notice when you're not looped in on a joke anymore. That's why you notice almost immediately when the tone in a room shifts when you walk in. You are running threat detection software built for a world of 30 people around one fire, and you're running it in a world of billions of people and infinite screens. No wonder it sometimes misfires. No wonder it sometimes fires when nothing is actually wrong. No wonder it sometimes stays silent when it should be screaming. But the core function still works exactly as designed. It is still, to this day, trying to keep you inside the circle. Because as far as your oldest, deepest programming is concerned, the circle is still the only thing standing between you and the dark. So what do you do with all of this? You don't need to outsmart this system. You can't, really, and you probably wouldn't want to. It's the same system that makes you show up for people you love. The same system that makes community feel meaningful instead of optional. The same system that turns strangers into friends and friends into family. It isn't a flaw. It's the very thing that let a hairless, clawless primate take over the planet by learning to survive together instead of alone. What you can do is understand it. The next time you feel that sharp, disproportionate sting from being left out of something small, you don't have to be embarrassed by it, and you don't have to pretend it isn't real. It is real. It's one of the oldest alarms in your body, inherited from every single ancestor who ever lived long enough to have children of their own. And the next time you feel that ache of loneliness, even in a crowded room, remember what it actually is. Not weakness, not failure. A signal. Doing exactly the job it was built to do. Hundreds of thousands of years ago. Around a fire, under a sky your ancestors couldn't afford to face alone. The deadliest mistake an ancient human could ever make wasn't a wrong turn, or a wrong plant, or a wrong step near a cliff's edge. It was believing they didn't need anyone else. And somewhere inside you, right now, a very old part of your brain is still making absolutely sure you never make that mistake either.